Good afternoon. Thank you for joining our webinar to learn more about ERA's newest funding opportunity, the Drilling Technology Challenge. My name is Isabella Tarasco, Technology Investment Lead with Emissions Reduction Alberta. I'm joined today by Justin Riemer, CEO, and Chris Owttrim, ERA's Executive Director of Technology and Innovation. Thank you for joining us. Today we are discussing ERA's Drilling Technology Challenge. Funding calls like this take months of planning, engagement, and collaboration with our partners in the private and public sectors, and we thank them for their input. We are excited to host you here today to dive a little bit deeper into this funding opportunity. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to start by going through a few housekeeping items. First of all, everyone's microphone is muted to avoid unintentional background noise. If you encounter technical challenges related to the webinar connection, please email Neil at nwhedon@eralberta.ca and we will do our best to help you out. However, if you can't resolve your technical issues or if you need to leave early, we will be posting a recording of this webinar on our website, usually within 24 hours, so please check back in about a day or so. This webinar, along with the slides, will be uploaded on our webpage for the Drilling Technology Challenge, which is linked off our funding page. The recording will also include the live Q&A with audio. Speaking of the Q&A, in the top right of your screen, you'll notice a question mark icon. Clicking this will open a side panel where you can type in your questions. A quick note, please do not enter questions in the comments section. As a final housekeeping note, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter or subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on everything taking place at ERA. We have 1 hour for today's session. To start, Justin will give a brief overview of ERA and our mandate. Then Chris will walk through the details of the call. We'll highlight key points on scope and eligibility, the submission process, and the timelines for funding decisions. Then we'll wrap up with Q&A session. We promise to get to as many questions as we can, and if we don't get to yours, please feel free to follow up with us afterwards. And so with that, I'll hand things over to Justin to get us started.
Thanks, Isabella, and hello, everyone. It's always a pleasure to share the story of ERA and the impact of the exciting work that we do. So who is ERA and how do we fit into all of this? ERA is a key delivery partner for the government of Alberta, and we also deploy federal government energy efficiency funding as well. Since 2009, when Alberta introduced Canada's first industrial carbon pricing system, ERA was established to reinvest those funds into technologies that both reduce emissions and grow the economy. So our role is to de-risk projects in that critical stage between research and commercialization, market adoption. We do this through a competitive, transparent funding process that ensures alignment with both government priorities and industry needs. And our vision is simple: a competitive, diversified, low emissions Alberta economy that measures success in both economic and environmental terms. And our mission is to accelerate the adoption and development of innovative solutions ranging from clean technology, energy efficiency to recycling, water, and land management. We are very proud to have our operations as a lean and cost-effective model in order to maximize the value we provide to Albertans and globally. So our key partner is the Government of Alberta, and we receive our funding through TIER, the Technology Innovation Emissions Reduction Fund. This fund is sourced from Alberta's large emitters who are required to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to meet regulated targets under Alberta's climate change regulations. And the TIER fund is a cornerstone of our climate strategy in this province. It provides a clear line of sight to the industrial carbon price that industry pays to investment in solutions that industry needs to reduce emissions and support competitiveness. That support from the Government of Alberta through the TIER Fund is essential for ERA to continue to drive innovation and sustainability in the province. And that partnership enables us to make impactful investments that contribute to both economic growth and emission reduction goals. We are strongly aligned with Government of Alberta priorities in areas like carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, energy efficiency, materials and minerals, artificial intelligence, and others. This alignment ensures that our investments support the province's strategic goals and drive to meaningful progress. So what are our outcomes? So in total, since 2009, We've invested close to $1 billion in 320 projects worth $10.3 billion. It's important to note that we require one-to-one investment from private sources for all of our funding. Public funding is not enough to accelerate these new technologies, and industry very much needs to have skin in the game. Historically, we've significantly exceeded this requirement. For every dollar invested in ERA, almost $6 is invested by private funders. And for the mathematicians out there, to ensure accuracy of the leverage ratio, projects with high project costs are capped at $1 billion, as those that are higher are considered outliers, just in case anyone caught that. This leverage is important to ensure that industry and the market see that there is a market demand for the technology. The impact is not only in the economic side, but on the environmental as well. And you can see in this next chart also some of the other economic outcomes from our projects. By 2027, 51,000 person years of employment in Alberta, contributing nearly $8.2 billion to the province's GDP. And that benefit extends when you consider Canada as a whole. This demonstrates Alberta's leadership in clean technology benefits the entire country, not just the province. An interesting chart for some of you who may have seen is that we have a very diverse investment portfolio, which is critical to our success in terms of the sectors we fund. We support projects that align with Alberta's largest sources of emissions, including the oil sands, electricity, and transportation. But as you can see, it extends to a wider range of sectors, illustrating considerable impact. Each investment helps reduce emissions, attract new investment, and create jobs. And this balanced approach strengthens our economy while accelerating the shift to lower emissions. It's important to note that ERA invests across the province, just not in Edmonton and Calgary. With the large industrial emitters we support, this chart here shows the map of various projects that we funded across the province, both with large emitters and small, medium-sized innovators. The large facilities need to improve their competitiveness and reduce emissions today, while smaller innovators are creating the solutions that will help shape the future economy in this province. And by funding this full spectrum and encouraging partnerships between large emitters and small, medium-sized firms, ERA ensures that the benefits of our investment are spread across that province. And you can see on the map that innovation is happening everywhere. Of course, projects like the ones I've shared don't happen by accident. ERA's investment decisions are guided by our technology roadmap, and I'd encourage you to go online and check it out for yourself. The document lays out the pathways for Alberta to become a global hub for innovation, identifying key technology areas where we can build new strengths and seize new opportunities. Grid technologies and other technologies in support of the energy industry are a core part of this roadmap. In fact, we can see them as a backbone for achieving both economic growth and environmental outcomes across the province. So just to close the loop on how we operate, our technology roadmap is used to develop our annual business plan, which then outlines funding programs and investment areas we will prioritize each year. So in recent years, you'll have seen programs like the Industrial Transformation Challenge and those that we have seen in the slides before, like accelerating hydrogen. We just had an advanced materials call not that long ago. Programs like these are how we allocate the lion's share of our funding. But I should add, we also have a continuous intake program that allows us to remain nimble in addressing gaps to ensure high potential and strategically important projects can be evaluated out of the traditional call for proposal cycle. The Drilling Technology Challenge is our latest offering, and today we turn to funding that opportunity that builds on more of a century of Alberta's leadership on the world stage, drilling. Drilling technologies are an essential part of Alberta's energy and innovation landscape. The groundwork is in place, and now is the time to build on it. And to drive that success, we're committing $35 million through the Drilling Technology Challenge to fast track the development and commercialization of new solutions. This challenge is designed to support the scale-up, the piloting, and the real-world deployment of the most promising technologies. While oil and gas companies are encouraged to apply, this also extends to emerging opportunities in geothermal energy, carbon capture sequestration, critical minerals, resource extraction, and more. We're looking for technologies that improve the safety, reduce costs, cut emissions, and scale across multiple applications. This is a call for tech developers, researchers, and industry leaders with bold ideas and practical solutions. It's about maintaining our leadership, staying competitive, and leveraging our strengths to address our challenges. And with that, I'd like to pass things over to Chris.
Thank you very much, Justin. I'm very excited to be here today to introduce our newest funding call, which, as you said, is the Drilling Technology Challenge. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about why we're launching this opportunity. As Justin mentioned, Alberta has a rich history of over a century of experience in the drilling space. That legacy, combined with our skilled workforce and world-class infrastructure, positions our province to lead in the development of next-generation drilling solutions that will provide benefits around the world, as well as right here at home. Through this $35 million challenge, ERA is supporting projects that reduce costs, improve safety, lower emissions, and deliver significant economic and environmental benefits. This challenge also builds directly on the vision of the Alberta Drilling Accelerator, which was announced by the Government of Alberta in April of 2024. And this accelerator matters because it provides a platform to test new technologies, connect innovators with industry, and move promising solutions forward faster. These initiatives, like the Drilling Technology Challenge, ensure that Alberta stands at the forefront of next-generation drilling technologies that are safer, cleaner, and more competitive than ever before. So I've already spoken a little bit to the high level of the why we're interested in investing in this area. And of course, building on Alberta's legacy of drilling innovation is certainly the starting point, but it doesn't end there. The expertise that we have in this space is a strong foundation for the future. And by putting this $35 million investment to work towards next generation solutions, ERA believes that we'll help unlock that next wave of innovation. Picture electrified drill rigs, advanced sensors, and automation driving progress in geothermal, lithium extraction, helium, carbon storage, as well as conventional oil and gas. And when we think about what those projects can achieve, it's really in the results that you can measure. Job creation, attraction of investment to our province, and significant environmental benefits, including emissions reductions. Now to share a little bit about funding available. So just to talk a little bit about dollars, we have up to $35 million available through this competition with a maximum funding allocation of $8 million per project. The minimum project request is $250,000, which really reflects the scale of solutions we're aiming to support. If there's work that's happening at a smaller scale or requires a smaller level of support, there's other programming available in the province to do so. We believe that this funding is truly meaningful and it's designed for projects with the potential to deliver big results. As Justin said, it's about taking that leap from research to actually demonstrating and deploying technologies in the field. As always, we will fund on a one-to-one matching basis for eligible expenses, ensuring that industry is right there alongside us in investing in innovation and that there's real market pull for these solutions. Please do take a look at our eligible expense and cost instructions online for more information regarding cost matching and eligibility of costs. Now to get to the really fun part, at least for me, which is the technology examples and what we're really interested in focusing on in this funding competition. Of course, as most of our programs, I will stress that this is not a technology prescriptive program. And we're also not limiting applications based on the type of resource that the technology applies to. So if you're a conventional oil and gas company, if you're developing a geothermal technology, if you're going after lithium or other critical minerals and materials, all of those resources, as long as there's drilling innovation, could be applicable. What you'll see on the slide here is a list of examples of areas, broad technology areas that we think might be applicable to the call and that could present really strong opportunities for funding. These have been informed by our extensive engagement with both government and industry. And again, I'd just like to thank everyone that participated in our engagement sessions and helped us refine this list. As you can see at a high level, really what we're focused on in this funding call is improving drilling and completion performance. And that could be performance along a number of dimensions, including cost, speed, efficiency, energy use and emissions, other environmental impacts, and other key factors. So just to drill down a bit, pun intended, on the technologies on the list. First of all, advanced drilling methods. So this is hopefully self-explanatory, but anything that really helps us drill in a better way. And that could include more esoteric and novel technologies, things like advanced percussive or water jet drilling, plasma and millimeter and other electrically driven methods, as well as hybrid mechanical thermal systems, for example, in super hard or super deep rock. We're also open to things like large bore drilling, which we know is extremely important for things like geothermal. Next on the list, downhole tooling and sensors. We know that sensing and really understanding what we're working with downhole, understanding the performance of our drilling system, and understanding the geography and lithology that we're dealing with is extremely important. So when we think about high temperature, high pressure sensors for extreme environments, more real-time telemetry diagnostics, improved resistance of the materials and coatings used downhole, as well as advanced drill controls. That leads me directly into the third point, which is automation and digital optimization. We know this is an extremely exciting area in many industries, and I think drilling is maybe one of the most exciting areas when we think about applying machine learning and advanced AI tools to really optimize how we're drilling by predicting bit paths in real time, automating rig operations, and improving our predictive maintenance so that we can stay online for longer and drill that much faster. Energy efficient and low impact systems, again, relatively self-explanatory, but we are really looking for the drilling rigs and the drilling systems of the future. So that could include fuel switching, electrification, dual fuel systems, and other sort of advanced equipment that might be deployed on site. We're also looking at the fluid systems involved. So what are the drilling fluid formulations and other technologies that are being applied downhole and at the rig. And certainly when we think about extended environmental benefits, the idea of how do we reduce the footprint of these drilling systems in the entire rig and the pad are very, very exciting. Almost done, but geothermal and critical mineral specific innovations. Again, this is recognizing that a lot of our drilling focus in the past has been on a certain type of geography. As we start to go after additional types of resources and new industry opportunities, we know that we're going to have to adapt our drilling technologies accordingly. And so anything that really allows us to take drilling technologies and apply them to these new resources, especially when it comes to drilling and completing in different types of lithology and geography, that's going to be particularly important. Last but not least, enabling infrastructure and support systems. So we did mention that things like improved safety outcomes, improved performance, improved health, improved environmental benefits are all important. And a lot of that does come to how we manage our rigs, how we track data, and how we test new technologies in a way that's still safe and aligned with best practice. So I hope that gives you a bit of flavor of what we're looking for. Again, it's quite broad. As long as you're doing something that's going to enhance our ability to drill and complete and access new resources, we want to hear from you. And please do reach out to our team if you are not sure if your technology is on this list or if you think you might have something that we haven't thought of. We love to have those conversations, and we're very happy to get a proposal from you if you do align with the intended outcomes of the program. All right, on the other side of the coin, of course, we do have some out of scope technologies and projects. And of course, this is really intended to make sure that the best available technologies and opportunities rise to the top and that we're funding things that are consistent with the objectives of the program. So we do have eligibility criteria around business as usual technologies or solutions. We are looking for an element of technology de-risking. So if your project is purely addressing a financial barrier, unfortunately, that's not typically the type of thing we fund. We are looking for you to make a case for that technology advancement. So that covers off the first two bullets. After that, so scopes that represent only a portion of a complete project. So if you're coming to us with just a piece of something bigger, typically that could look like an engineering study. We know you need to do front end work before you get into the field, construction of infrastructure, building equipment but not deploying it. All of those things can be part of an eligible project, but if you propose it by itself, it's not going to be eligible. So again, it's worthwhile thinking about what scope you're proposing to us and making sure that you're getting into the field and demonstrating a technology by the end of your project. That's essential. And then one thing that's specific to this call that we had a lot of engagement on and a lot of conversation on is resource assessments and exploration. We know that exploration is a key part of resource development and resource quantification. What we're looking for, though, is technology advancement. So we want to advance specific solutions and things that unlock whole categories of resources. We're not looking to characterize the amount of resource in a specific formation or drill test wells to measure downhole temperature. We really are looking for new technology that makes those things easier. And so that could certainly be an eligible project. Again, if you're not certain, please do connect with us and we're happy to go into a bit more detail on these requirements. Stage of development is a question we get a lot. Where do we invest and at what point can we come in on a project? Typically what we're looking for, if you're familiar with the technology readiness level range, is we're looking for projects at a technology readiness level of at least 5. So we're looking for technologies where there's been a proof of concept, that preliminary R&D and prototyping is complete, and we're now ready to pilot or test in a representative environment at an absolute minimum. And then as we go up the technology readiness level spectrum, we're very happy to see projects in the range of demonstration and even first of kind commercial implementation. So that is quite a broad range. Again, the way to think about it is by the end of the project, if you're getting in the field and showing us how your technology works in a real world situation, you're probably in the right ballpark. Project structure. So we are launching this call here in October of 2025. I'll have a slide on timelines shortly, but what we do hope for all projects that submit is that you will demonstrate readiness to commence your project within 120 days of approval. So again, we're planning to approve these projects in June of next year, so we'd be looking for you to launch by Q3, Q4 of next year. Applicants may request a delayed start of up to 12 months. Again, we know that it takes time to stand these projects up. It takes time to align with site turnarounds and whatnot. That is something we're happy to be flexible on. Please, again, just get in touch with us. And then a big question we get frequently is how long can these projects last and over what period can the funds be dispersed? So for the Drilling Technology Challenge, our maximum project length of actually developing and deploying the technology is 3 years, but we know that sometimes these technologies need to be demonstrated over multiple drilling seasons to really demonstrate the benefits. So we are open to projects that have a 3-year operational period for data collection and optimization where applicable. Again, something we're happy to talk with you if you have questions about how that could work. We recognize the need for rapid progress, and really with the tight focus of this call, we're expecting somewhat of a smaller volume than we typically get with our broad open calls that we do each year, where the volume seems to keep going up. So for this call, we have implemented a modified intake process that's somewhat specific to this program. It is what we call roughly a 1.5 stages of adjudication. So first, we'll accept submissions from all interested applicants. We'll screen them for eligibility and then submit them to a rigorous competitive process to establish a short list of strong opportunities. So that's really the top row of the diagram that you see here. Applicants on the shortlist will then be invited to present to our expert review panel and will be subjected to additional due diligence. That will culminate with a recommendation to ERA's board of directors, who will make the final funding decision, after which we'll proceed with award and contracting with the successful projects. As promised, the timeline slide. So again, we're launching here in October. Our deadline for submission of applications is January 29th of 2026 at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. From there, again, we'll undertake our review, and applicants who are shortlisted as a result of that review will be notified by late March 2026, and we'll have their presentations scheduled for April of 2026. Following that, again, we'll bring the recommendations to our board for a final funding decision. We'll notify all applicants of that decision by June of 2026. And again, at that point is when we'll look to commence projects. So we'll enter into contribution agreements with successful applicants, and we'll look for you to begin your project in short order. ERA funding recipients are required to produce final outcomes reporting that are shared publicly to help advance technologies towards commercialization and benefit everybody in the market. Funding recipients must also report on project outcomes, achievements, and lessons learned, which can include quantified metrics like emissions reductions, job creation, and other environmental, economic, and social benefits. But it can also include some commentary around what you've learned during the project, how you've advanced the technology, and what the next steps are for commercialization of your solution. This may include confidential sharing of data with ERA, as well as publication of non-confidential public reports and other impact deliverables that we may require. That could include hosting knowledge sharing workshops, participating in lessons learned events, or other knowledge sharing initiatives. And if you're really lucky, you'll get to sit in on an episode of our podcast with me, just in case you're not sick of my voice yet. For this call, ERA anticipates that all funded projects will participate in meaningful engagement and information sharing with regulators, First Nations communities, and other relevant stakeholders. We heard loud and clear through our engagement sessions that stakeholder engagement is extremely important when we're commercializing new drilling technologies, making sure that we have buy-in and support from regulators and others that these technologies can advance. Proponents are strongly encouraged to include elements of these plans and stakeholder engagement in your project plan to begin with, and we also reserve that right to impose communications and community engagement requirements on all funded projects. So this is the last slide for me before we get to our Q&A, so thank you for bearing with me. What we always hear from folks, are there any tips ERA can provide on preparing an application? So the first thing is, start now. We have a few months between today's webinar and the submissions in the new year. And I know that 2026, January 29th feels a long way away, but I promise you it's not. The fall goes quite quickly, and then all of a sudden we're into the holiday season and into the new year. So if you wait, you may not have time to prepare a high quality application. So please start now. You can use the time to develop your proposal in the best way possible, to line up resources, letters of support, partners on the project, and other essential components that will make your proposal stand out from the volume of projects we'll receive. Make sure you're set up in our online portal, Grant Manager. The link is here. It's also provided on our website and in the program guidelines. This is really, really important to make sure that you have an active account there. If you've applied previously and you're not sure if your account is still active, you really don't want to find that out 5 minutes before the deadline in January. So please, again, take a look at that portal now. There's a lot of great information on there. And in fact, most of the questions we get are either on the application portal or answered on the documents that we provide on our website. When it comes to that, the guidelines documents that you'll see listed on our website include our call for proposals document, which are sort of the program guidelines. We also have a separate document for eligible expenses and costs. And of course, we have our response template that we'll use to structure your responses and make sure you've addressed all the questions we need answered in order to make our determination on the project. The key thing you're going to want to look at when you read those guidelines documents is really around the merit evaluation criteria. So in this call, those include technology advancement, project implementation and readiness, environmental performance and outcomes, economic and ancillary benefits, stakeholder engagement, and commercialization and market fit. And what I really encourage you to do is think about how you can put your best foot forward in each of those categories and really convince our review panel and ultimately our board that you have a very complete and comprehensive project that's going to achieve the outcomes of the program. So by reading those criteria, as well as the eligibility criteria that I touched on earlier, you can be sure to put your best foot forward with the proposal. And in particular, if you find out early that your project isn't eligible or doesn't fit this call, but maybe fits a different one, you'll save yourself a lot of time by finding that out early, and you can start that conversation with us instead of having to find out in June and then starting the conversation from there. Along the same lines, it's really important to make sure that you answer all the questions that we ask, both in the portal and in the template, and to make sure that you've spent that time on the sections with the most weight. It sounds simple, but you'd be shocked how many proponents we get where they've left a section blank or provided minimal information, and I can assure you that that does not reflect well when we do our ranking of the projects. So with that, thank you for your attention as I've shared the details on the call. We're very happy now to take questions, so I'll hand it back to Isabella to moderate our Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So that brings us to the end of the formal part of today's session. We'd love to hear from you and answer any questions that you might have today. Again, if we don't get to your questions today, or if you think of a question after the webinar, please connect with us afterwards. We'd be more than happy to respond by email or have a quick discussion with you. So first question, will applications associated with improving the environmental aspect of drilling be considered? The short answer is absolutely. So in our template, you'll see that there is a section in there for improved environmental performance. So please take a read there. We are looking at both greenhouse gas reductions as well as additional water, air, and land benefits for those projects. Next question. What if I don't have all the elements lined up in time for application deadlines, such as project costs or a site host? Can I still apply?
This is a fantastic question. I'm happy to respond. We know that at the time of application, you may not have all the elements of your project in hand. In particular, it takes a lot of time to pull partnerships together and secure financing. Many times we are the first dollars in on projects as long as there's a clear financing plan after. So the shorter answer is no, you don't have to have all your I's dotted and T's crossed in order to apply. But we do assess the readiness of your proposal and the ability to proceed should we approve funding. So what you're going to want to do is, even if you don't have, if you're missing a key element, you're going to want to give us a clear line of sight on how you're going to secure that by the time of project commencement. And that's really going to be your best strategy to make sure that your project gets due consideration.
And to that point, we are increasingly looking at project readiness. So if you're maybe not ready this year, ERA does launch challenges usually twice per year. So we do have our Industrial Transformation Challenge call that we launch every spring. So I would say keep an eye on that because we do want projects that are essentially ready to go and can meet the 120-day start timeline. So keep that in mind. Does funding need to come only from Alberta or Canadian-based companies? Who is eligible to apply? Also a fantastic question. We accept applications coming from companies anywhere in the world that want to demonstrate and pilot their technologies in Alberta. And we also had a follow-on question, does the project need to happen in Alberta? I would say if you are an Alberta-based company looking to pilot your project elsewhere, if there's a test site outside of the province, we are absolutely open to reviewing those applications on a case-by-case basis, provided that there is a follow-up benefit to the province after the project. Okay, next question. Can you please explain funding must be matched 1-to-1? And in follow-up to that, what about royalty cost allowances?
Fantastic question. So as Justin said, one thing we're really keen to see on all of our projects is market pull and interest from industry. And one of the ways you can demonstrate that in your proposal is demonstrating private dollars at the table to match ERA's contribution. So ERA never funds 100% of the costs of a project. We always max out our contribution at a maximum of 50%. So that means that at least 50% of your budget needs to be supported by private sources. Now, the question around royalty allowances is a great question. Typically, ERA does not match future revenue or offset of costs when we're talking about matching. So if you read our eligibility cost guidelines, you can take a closer look at some of those factors. What we're typically looking for is cash, equity, debt, other sources of funding that will actually be able to cover project costs during the project, because our funds are dispersed on a reimbursement basis. So there has to be some money at the table in order to carry out the project, even if future revenue will be realized from royalty allowances, from other government incentives and similar. So that's something our team can walk you through. I know it's something that's a little bit different for each project in terms of what funding sources you may have available. Definitely something we're happy to have a conversation about in advance of your application if you're concerned about your funding mix.
I also just wanted to add that there is a little note in our guidelines about this, in that our contributions must not be used to reduce the cost claimed against resource royalties payable to the Government of Alberta or regulatory compliance obligations. So this applies broadly to any project that we undertake. It's really essential that applicants really do their due diligence and are aware of any of these restrictions, which ultimately are grounded in the principle of avoiding double counting from public resources. Okay, next question is around ongoing projects. So do these projects count? Will ERA match costs for work already complete? So projects that are ongoing do count. However, ERA will only match costs from the application due date. So that's that January 29th, 2026 due date. Any project costs incurred prior to the application submission deadline will be considered out of scope and will not be considered eligible for a match. So just keep that in mind. But if your project is ongoing, please come to us, talk to us, let us know what stage you're at, and then we can provide you with some direction in terms of path forward. Next question, when trialing a new technology like a mud system additive or software, the technology cost may be minimal compared to the overall well cost, but the operational risk impacts the entire drilling program. Could we clarify if day rate rig costs or a portion thereof would be considered eligible expenses in recognition of that risk?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, and it's something we dealt with a lot in our engagement sessions, trying to wrap our heads around. You can't demonstrate a new drilling technology without doing the drilling. So to your point around, can a portion of the day rate be included? In general, yes. We do need to see direct connection between the costs that are incurred and the demonstration of the new technology. So it may not be the full drilling cost for the entire duration, but it really will depend on a case-by-case basis. There's certainly some technologies that will be present and incurring costs throughout the drilling life cycle, and there could be some that are only on site for a day or what have you. So that is going to depend a little bit on the technology by technology basis, but in principle, we are open to offsetting a portion of the total cost, not just the incremental cost of the new technology.
Okay, next question. Will ERA prioritize non-oil and gas technologies, or will it be a balance of both oil and gas and non-oil and gas technologies? From our standpoint, again, we're looking for all projects in all sectors. So we're not prioritizing one sector over another. It really is looking at the types of technologies that come in that advance the specific sectors that they're used for.
And one thing I'll just quickly add is, one of the really cool things about drilling is that benefits for one type of resource can really be applied to other resources. So when you're writing your proposal, even if you're an oil and gas company, I really encourage you to take, a couple of minutes and think about, can this technology improvement, if I prove it out for oil and gas, can I export it to the geothermal industry, or can I share it with the lithium industry and license it? Sort of in the concept of a rising tide lifts all ships. Making the case for transferability of your technology is really, really valuable in terms of differentiating the great projects from the good projects.
Right. We had a question around the EOI stage. So typically for our regular calls for proposals, other calls for proposals, we have a two-stage application process. This call is a single application process. So there is no expression of interest or full project proposal stage. It's just a single window application, 20 pages. Follow the template and the appendices that are attached. Please submit that with your application, and then we will do a review and invite applicants to a shortlist stage to provide a presentation to reviewers, as well as answer some reviewer questions that come out of that initial stage. So this is a single window application stage. Our next question focuses on currently stranded assets. So how is ERA looking at these types of projects that potentially include abandoned wells?
Fantastic question. Another thing that came up quite a bit in our engagements. So to the extent that there's technology solutions that enable us to re-enter or restart orphaned wells or even abandoned wells, that's something we're very keen to hear about, and again, could certainly be in scope, providing there's a technology de-risking component to the project. Again, when we think about incremental costs versus costs that are necessary to do the project, we would look at the cost to acquire and restart assets on a case-by-case basis, and it really again depends on the technology and what those incremental costs are.
Along the same lines, there was mention that completion performance improvement projects may be eligible. Would that include tests related to well stimulation?
That's an excellent question. I think again we're looking for things that improve performance from a technology basis. So if you're going in to stimulate a well in a conventional way with off-the-shelf technology to improve performance, and you're looking to test the extent to which you've improved that performance, I don't think that's going to be a very strong opportunity. If you're bringing a new technology to bear on that completion and that stimulation, then absolutely that's eligible, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and again, the focus is on demonstrating new technologies or methods, projects that focus solely on resource extraction activities are not eligible. So I would just say, come and talk to us if you're potentially unsure. The last thing we want to do is for you to have a great project and self-select out. So just come talk to us anytime you have any questions. The next question is focused on the technology readiness level. So we mentioned that there's a technology readiness level threshold of 5, but in some of the material we look at 7 to 9. Can we clarify that that technology readiness level? So from our standpoint, ERA likes to fund those later stages of technology development. So when we say project TRL level 7 to 9, we want to see projects end at that stage. However, if you're at a 5 or a 6, so you've actually completed and have a prototype, you have a minimum viable product, you've done some testing on it, come and talk to us and we'll let you know if your technology is potentially in scope or if you should look at other avenues of funding to potentially develop your technology to that stage.
And just building on what Isabella said before, we really don't want folks to inadvertently self-select themselves out when they might be eligible. So given that the TRL spectrum is certainly an imprecise measure and there's some gray area between those categories, again, it really behooves you to come talk to us before submitting an application, and we can give you a sense of if you're aligning with the type of project that we're hoping to see, which is ultimately the important criteria.
Next question, does ERA prefer to fund many small projects or fewer large ones? What is the right sweet spot, I guess, that we look for?
Love this question. This is what Isabella and I spend a lot of our time thinking about. I think in general, we're very keen to fund a range of technologies. So that if it looks like we're getting, we can get value from a couple of big projects, we're happy to do so. There is a reason we've set the maximum at 8 million when the funding envelope is 35. That guarantees sort of a minimum number of projects that will be funded. And that's really reflective of the fact we do want to spread the dollars around. On a typical call, we will fund projects right from the minimum all the way up to the maximum and in roughly equal proportion. You can take a look at some of our previous funding announcements and see that for yourself. So the project size is not, I would say, a determining criteria. What we're really looking for you to do is to justify the amount of money you're requesting and how it'll advance your technology.
Okay, we had another question around project duration. So providing more clarification on the project duration. ERA requires all project activities to complete within 3 years. So say your project starts within 120 days after you receive that funding approval, it has to complete within 3 years. And then you have an additional 1 year of operational and data collection. So 3 years to complete the actual project, get all of those activities in, and have all of those project costs completed and essentially signed off on. Okay, next question. Are NSERC or other research funds eligible to be used as matching funds?
The quick answer is no. So we don't match other government agencies, whether provincial, federal, or elsewhere. The dollars that you use for match on the ERA contribution do need to be private. However, we do not have any stacking requirement. So there is certainly a scenario where ERA and other government funders could add up to 66 or even 75% of the project, and only a smaller portion is provided by the private sector. But that ERA contribution needs to be matched one-to-one. So we have a number of examples in the guidelines that hopefully illustrate that. But as an example, if you were only asking for a fifth of the project to be funded by ERA, you would only have to match that with a fifth of the budget private, and the remaining funding, 3/5 could be from some other government agency, and that's perfectly fine.
There's always some questions about in-kind matching and in-kind funding. And I would say from ERA's perspective, it is very challenging for us to match in-kind expenses in a project. We need to understand where our funding is going and understand that our funding is actually not displacing any other funding. It needs to be a true match. So I would say for those applicants that are unsure if in-kind contributions are eligible, please read our eligibility criteria and our guidelines. And then if you're still unsure, please send us a message and send us a note, because sometimes we would have to reduce our contribution in the end if the project does end up getting funded and the in-kind contribution is not a true eligible match. So just take that into consideration. It is very tricky for us to match some of those in-kind contributions. We just need to know what those are. Okay, another quick question here. Are research teams from outside of Alberta eligible to apply? And if yes, can the pilot implementation site be located outside of Alberta but within Canada?
We've answered a similar one to this, but just to put a finer point on it. So applicants can be based anywhere in the world. So you could be a research organization from elsewhere in Canada, elsewhere internationally. You could be a company headquartered anywhere from Alberta to the rest of Canada to somewhere else internationally. And yes, you can still apply. Typically, when it comes to projects that occur in part or in whole outside of Alberta, what we're looking for is really clear articulation of Alberta benefits. So typically, if the actual pilot site is outside Alberta, we'd really be looking for very strong Alberta partners and usually an Alberta-based lead organization on the project. Again, it's somewhat of a case by case. By and large, we do want to see project activities happening in Alberta, but we recognize that sometimes those test sites are not always available. So there is flexibility. Again, it really helps to just come in and share your specific situation with us.
Right. We had a question about if a project is currently shovel ready, is there an opportunity to accelerate the timeline presented? Unfortunately, no. The timelines outlined are the timelines that we are working with. However, what gives applicants some flexibility is that we do match costs up to that application deadline date. So again, if your project is already in motion, come and talk to us, let us know where you're at. And as of that January 29th date, obviously it's a proponent's own risk if they incur project activities prior to a funding approval, but January 29th would be when we would be able to match some of those project costs and backdate some of our payments. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully that helps. We had another question here about IP and how ERA treats intellectual property generated.
Yeah, great question, Isabella. In general, ERA doesn't take any ownership of IP. We want to be advancing technology towards commercialization. So we do have certain provisions in our contribution agreement around, what happens if there's, misuse of funds or what have you. Those situations tend to be extremes and are not generally realized. In a typical project, there's no restriction on IP ownership or rights following receipt of ERA funding, provided you're complying with our reporting obligations.
Okay. How does ERA look at project with, one company with multiple potential projects for an application? I would say from our standpoint, our general calls for proposals, it is unlikely that we would fund two or three different projects from one applicant. There are certain calls for proposals where this is an exception. However, with this call, it is unlikely that we would fund 3 or 4 different projects from one applicant. So I would say put your best foot forward. You're more than welcome to submit more than one application for different projects to see where they go if you have the resources and capacity. But from our standpoint, you know, it's best to underline where you're putting your resources and that capacity.
And the other part of that question is around if you do have 3 or 4 technologies that you're considering, really give some thought to how you can bundle that together. So can you make a case for under one application supporting 2 or 3 of those technologies that may all play off each other? And that's something we're happy to look at. Obviously, we don't want a bundle of 10 or 20 different widgets in one project, but certainly within reason, there's a lot of value in bundling if it means you can get support for your whole initiative, as opposed to, as Isabella said, being restricted to one per company.
All right, and along the same lines, what if there are multiple partners that are applying for one project? So from our standpoint, ERA only contracts with one entity. So find a project lead, and that lead is going to be responsible for distributing the funds for that project and managing that project. I would say be very clear on who is going to be responsible for different elements of the project and carrying the project activities forward. Another question, will ERA fund test sites or test programs in this call?
This is a great question. I think it is applicable under our technology example relating to enabling infrastructure and support systems. We would be looking for a really strong understanding of what technologies we're supporting through that. So, a test site for drilling could be a well pad, but it wouldn't have any technology innovation. So there does have to be an element of what are we advancing by supporting this shared infrastructure. So again, that's a little bit on the margins, but it's certainly something we're not ruling out. So please come talk to us.
I would say we're less amenable to funding programs that kind of have an indefinite life and kind of ongoing, rotating door of technologies that come in and test solutions. So just, I would say, come and talk to us with your ideas, and we'll essentially provide you with some guidelines in terms of whether it meets the criteria. Another question, what if a company with operations in Alberta has technology developed outside of the province? So this goes in line with how much funding we'll dedicate to in Alberta costs versus outside of Alberta costs. I would say from our perspective, we're okay if manufacturing happens outside of the province, provided there's some good justification. So again, as long as there's good justification for project costs, we're amenable to that. Okay. I believe that answers the lion's share of the questions. I'm looking to see if there are any other questions that come up, so we'll keep the line open for another couple minutes here. So we have a question, how many applications do you typically get for specific calls? I would say this varies. So our broad call for proposals, which we launch every spring, the last Industrial Transformation Challenge call, we got 191 applications. So that one was our most competitive call for proposals yet. For these more tailored and niche calls, we usually see anywhere from 60 to 80 proposals submitted. So that just gives you an indication. Still quite competitive. We are generally oversubscribed for all of our calls for proposals. In terms of where folks can ask questions, come to our applications inbox. Applications team will forward you information about your question. If you detail it in the email, that's probably the best way to get a hold of us. And that's applications@eralberta.ca. That's found in the guidelines and on our website as well. We had some questions about finding partners and collaborating with partners. I would say ERA doesn't play a matchmaking role in the system. We prefer the market to evolve organically. So the best thing that we can do is if you see a project that's already funded on our website, you want to get in touch with them, we're more than happy to try and connect you with a proposal advisor, project advisor on that. Otherwise, we don't play a matchmaking role in our projects here. Another question came in, is social acceptance taken into account in the projects?
Great question. So one of our criteria that we have is stakeholder engagement, as well as a second criteria around commercialization. Social acceptance is a component of both of those. So obviously stakeholder engagement is about building social acceptance and making sure that your technology can demonstrate safety and efficacy and minimal impacts to health and the environment. Commercialization, of course, is all about, is your technology going to be able to be permitted? Is it going to be able to be built and rolled out across the province? And so social acceptance, as well as sort of the regulatory and policy side of it, is baked into that as well. So if that's something that your technology could have as a perceived risk, make sure you're addressing that in your responses to those criteria. But as well, just to put a positive spin on it, we want to, one of the reasons we fund these technology development projects is to build that social acceptance and familiarity with technologies. So if your technology project will provide a platform by which the public, for example, can see a tour or at least see the technology in action, that can be a great way to not only share lessons learned from your project and share outcomes, but it can be a great way, ditto for regulatory participation and things like that. It can be a great way to build that acceptance and awareness of your technology. So make sure you're considering elements like that when putting the proposal together.
Okay. Last question here. What about commercial demonstration? Would those projects be eligible?
So generally, our requirement for novelty, we spell it out in a good amount of detail in the guidelines. Generally, what we're looking for is for, defraying technical risk. So if you're, by commercial demonstration, you mean there's a commercial technology that hasn't been applied in Alberta before or in your particular industry before, then that's something that still could meet our definition of addressing technical risk. A really good example that's relevant to drilling is if there's a technology that maybe has been developed in oil and gas but hasn't been applied, for example, to lithium, to helium, to carbon sequestration, and you want to take that technology and apply it and demonstrate how it works in a different, parallel resource, that's absolutely something that you could make a case for under this program. So just because something's, commercialized elsewhere in the world certainly does not limit it to be funded in this program. And even if it's been commercialized in Alberta, but for a different application, you could still make a case. So do think about it in those terms and not just, pure first of kind, because we do have some flexibility.
All right, maybe just one more question here. Is the funding match based on projection of the project costs or based on existing project costs for an ongoing project?
Yeah, so the match is always about the go forward cost, as Isabella said. So we'd be looking for you to submit a budget for the activities that you'll be taking in the future and looking to match a portion of those costs and basically offset them for you. So if there have been, costs incurred for, let's say, a previous phase of the project, unfortunately, we're not able to match those or consider them as, in-kind or eligible matches of other forms. But we'd be looking for, okay, what's phase 2 of the project? How are you funding that? And how can our costs, come in to match? So that's really how you have to think about it.
All right. Wonderful. So thanks so much, everyone. With that, we will wrap it up. If you have any unanswered questions after our webinar and after reviewing our supporting materials, which do provide a lot of the information. So my recommendation is always to read the guidelines before you come to us with questions, because it's likely that your answer is in the guidelines. Please feel free again to email us, the applications inbox at applications@eralberta.ca, which you can see on your screen there. Finally, we expect to have the webinar posted on our website in the next day or two. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss future updates. Once again, thank you and have a great day.